Okay, we are going to get started. Let's go ahead and get some sort of a straight edge so that way we can do some straight lines. Now imagine your paper broken in half. I'm going to turn it the wide way here, and I want to stay on the left side of the paper right now. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make two vertical lines. They should be parallel with each other. They're both going up and down. And then when I do the top and bottom of this rectangle I'm making here, I'm kind of just lightly putting it in there, like a little dotted line, just a little light line that I can do. And then what I'm going to do underneath the dotted line is create a smile. When I say a smile, like a little smiley face smile, don't dip too far down, but just enough that we can see that there's a curve going on. Now the curve is changeable depending on the angle that you see a cylinder. So when I do this, it's time to compare the smile that I'm making below that line with a frown above that line. In other words, they should be very similar with how much they curve. Now, on the ends, it tends to be kind of pointy when you do this, and so I'm going to go back and erase the very ends and round it out just a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural. So the idea here is you make a cylinder by essentially making a rectangle that has a smile at the bottom, smile at the top, and then a frown at the very top. And that'll give us a basic cylinder shape. Now, I want you to imagine a light source shining upon it, and so we're going to practice some of that shading work that you guys did last time. And so start on the opposite side of your light source and start shading it in. At this point, we're going fairly dark. Maybe don't go all the way, just in case you have a mistake in here. You can always add to it and make it darker. But I'm going to start pretty dark on the right side, and now I'm going to start fading it. It's going to start to blend from dark to light as I go across. Again, this is like we practiced last time when we were learning about value, so I have it fading from dark to light. And so this blending that we're doing, I'm laying my pencil down really flat again, but as flat as you can make it, which means a good sharp pencil is very, very, very helpful. A mechanical pencil makes it almost impossible. So you want a regular pencil that you can sharpen and lay it down as flat as possible. Now, it makes sense you would go from dark to light, but on the very, very, very left edge, I'm going to give it a little bit of darkness. And that'll just kind of suggest that maybe the light's hitting it not exactly on the far left, but maybe over a little bit. So it just gives a little bit more roundness. So generally it's mostly dark on the right side, fading down to medium, fading down to very light, and then at the very end on the left side, going ahead and adding a tiny bit of darkness. Now we're going to add a cast shadow to this, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my straight edge, and what I want to do is I want to go from the shape like this. Now I'm going to just kind of lightly do it without the straight edge, just so I know the angle I'm going to do it, and then bring it in. And what you're going to do is slide it over once you get one on there. Now notice I'm going from the very corner here I see on the cylinder to the very edge or corner I see on this side, and I'm going to make that happen where it's like a parallel line, and then at the end I want it to curve because I want to show it. Now I can change the angle a bit, so like if I wanted it to come at more from the side, I could do it like this where it's a little flatter. So it's really up to you how you want to do it. I feel like this matched the shading on the cylinder better if I were to move it over a little bit more. So again, start at the corner, aim to the right down a little bit, and then make a parallel line to it. And then when you do that, you're going to have cast shadow showing up on your surface, table or whatever. Now as I shade it in, it's generally all the same darkness, except it is going to be darkest closest to the form itself, and so I'm going to make sure it's a little bit darker right there because it's not getting as much light bouncing in from the sides and all that, and so it gets a little bit lighter as I go across just naturally. Alright, so that's building a cylinder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try out our next shape. And so I'm going to do a cone. Now to start the cone, I first want to make sure it's going to be up and down. So I drew a very light line that went vertical. After I do a vertical line, I'm going to make a triangle that's on either side of that line that is pretty even so that that line should be about in the middle. Once you do that, then connect the bottom of the triangle with a smile, just like I did on the cylinder, and then erase out that middle line. The only point of that middle line is it helped us get it so that the cone wasn't leaning over. So once your cone is finished, then go ahead and shade it in, start on the right side, and do it dark. Now with this, it's going to be a little bit different than the cylinder, because the cylinder I was focused on going up and down, but with the cone, I'm going up toward the point. So it's a little bit slanted at first, it becomes less slanted as I go across until it finally gets to the middle, and I'll be basically going up and down at that point because I'm still going toward the point at the top. And so shading it in, kind of changing the direction as you go. Now it's a little bit trickier than the cylinder, of course, but you can do it, absolutely. So keep at it, keep shading it in, getting a little bit darker as it goes across. As you notice that it's kind of choppy, go back and blend it in a little bit better. So you can just keep going over it and over it and over it. All those little strokes, the back and forth that you do, the more strokes you have, the smoother it is. Also, again, I'm laying my pencil down so that way it's even smoother, and all the little lines that show up when you shade really fade out. As you go along, look for little patches where you miss stuff. Go back to edges and touch them up. You may have to erase some spots where it goes out of bounds. That sounds fine. I mean, that's why you have an eraser. You make mistakes and you fix them as you go. So now that I have the basics of this cone, I want to say, where would the shadow be if it was a cylinder? Well, it would be going like this. It would be going at two parallel lines that would be going the same direction. Now, that's good, but I want it to come to a point. So I want to make sure that if I was going to draw those parallel lines, how could I make it seem like they're actually going toward each other? And so basically I'm making a triangle that needs to go and touch the very outer edge of that cone shape that I drew, and then go ahead and start shading that in as well. So at this point it's going to be fairly similar to the cylinder because the cast shadow, it goes off to the right and down a little bit. And then I'm going to go a little bit darker when it's closest to the 3D form. In this case, it's the cone. Alright, so now let's do one more for the day. This one's pretty easy to draw. We're going to make a straight up and down line. And the straight up and down line is going to help us as we make a pyramid. So I'm going to make a down arrow. When I say down arrow, I mean like it's pointing down at the bottom of the screen at this point. Do make it a little bit tall. When you make it really short and you do this process, it can look a little weird sometimes. It's not wrong, but it can look weird. So I make my down arrow, and then I just connect the top of the arrow to the outside of the arrow point here. And then you'll have basically two triangles stuck together. Now, since we don't have any curves on this object, the shading is all going to be very even. So this whole face of this pyramid is all going to be the same darkness. So pick how dark you want to go and get it as smooth as you can in that space. So again, this is assuming that my light is coming in from the left side, from up above, and a little bit from the left. Now, that doesn't mean that your shadow is always going to be on the right. If you have your light coming in from the left, of course, it's going to be different. Now I'm going to do something really similar to the cast shadow on the cone, where I want to say, where would it be if it was a cylinder, and where would my parallel lines be, and then I'm finding where would the middle of that be. So as I go ahead and find what I think it is, the important thing to see here is that my shadow will be a triangle shape too, and it needs to touch the corners of the pyramid. Once you do that, go ahead and shade that in as well. So it should be pretty dark, especially darkest closest to the form itself. And it can get a little bit lighter as you go away. As light's coming in, it bounces off things and tends to hit it more as it's getting farther away. So it gives you a little cool effect there. So that's the basics of this. We're putting these three forms together, so you want to get this done. Feel good about any progress you made, any improvement you made. We're going to keep going on our next step next week, where we'll add some more forms.